Game 9 of the World Chess Championship match. It's hard to top the events of Game 8, an absolutely epic game, and sort of the aftermath as well, the training accounts being discovered. So, a lot of stories heading into this one. Ding has to defend now with the black pieces, and he goes for his favorite pawn to e5, which he has already played a bunch of times in this match. He did surprise in one game with the French, but here he's going back to the Spanish, or e4, e5, and the Spanish, which Nepo has been going for in this match. And here, okay, he's played 2 games where he played a6, so perhaps not too big of a surprise to see the move knight to f6, the Berlin. And this was also in the leaked training games. He did play the Berlin, so maybe he's just sticking to his guns. It looked like he prepared the Berlin. My guess is, depending on the match situation, he's got the Petrov prepared as well. But this is maybe not a big surprise. d3, bishop to c5, c3, castles, and Ding goes for d5 here. So white is not going for any of the lines where we double the pawns on c6. He kind of tested Ding in such structures under different circumstances in game 1. But here we have a trade on e4, d5 of course, an aggressive move by black. a5 now, sort of reminds me of a line of play against the King's Indian attack in the French for black. In that case, the bishop would be on g2 and pawn on g3, but otherwise the same position. The bishop being on b5 gives it a different dynamic. So white plays a4 here. The bishop is actually better on this diagonal than on g2 in this structure, it seems. So queen e7. White does not want to give up this bishop for the knight, even though we double the pawns. The black light squared bishop would become a pretty good piece, so white prefers to keep the pieces on. And now this maneuver knight b8. And this has been seen before, a bunch of games. Nakamura has played this in a bunch of games. Rook e1, rook to d8. And, sort of quiet play, as is often the case in this line. And one of the ideas of playing knight b8 is to kick this bishop away with c6. And also the fact that the knight, when it was on c6, if we back down a little bit, you can see it doesn't have a lot of scope. There are pawns here, these pawns are taken, so the knight needs a new square. Very often it goes to the king side, but that doesn't seem to be the case here. So knight b8, and then he plays this move c6. Bishop retreats, and knight a6. And here most people were expecting the knight to go to c7, so they were quite surprised when they saw the move queen to c7. But after a while, the commentators figured out that bishop f8 and knight c5 is the idea. But here we have possibly another leak. And to check that out, we're actually going to go here to Lead Chess. And where yet again, we're going to see the opening explorer. You can see in the Masters game, there are very few games here. 2 games with 2,400 level players. It's very unlikely that these games have been used for preparation. But when you go to the Lead Chess database, you see 1 game. It's iRobot 3. This was played in December 2022. So basically a novelty, but it has been played online. Now, of course, it could be a coincidence. But when you look at this account, well, first of all, it's account violated for terms of service. So maybe it's a computer. Somebody used a computer. But okay, we're not going to give up. There are a few games here where iRobot plays against PR Flora, an account that has also been closed. And, well, it's interesting. In one of the games they played, it was an English opening, something that Ding likes to play a lot. And e4 seems to fit the bill of something that he has been playing, getting these strong central positions. So this is quite plausible. And of course, very well played games. Good accuracy. And the next game that they played, this account I robot had black, and he played e5, just like Nepo has been doing. Could be a training game for an offbeat try by Nepo, such as c3, the Nepomniachtchi. And then the third game, it starts off as a Queen's Indian, but could be something that White wants to play against the Nimzo. Ding also plays d4, has played the Nimzo, allowed the Nimzo, so who knows. Finally, there was one game where iRobot had White and played the Najdorf. I played against the Najdorf. We did have some games, some training games from the other accounts, the 70 games. There were some games where it looked like they were training either for White to play some games with e4 or training for the Najdorf. So who knows, iRobot 3 on lead chess could be another leaked account. But moving on, back to the game. And after this move, queen to c7, Nepo did think for a while and he went with bishop to a2. Kind of a waiting move. b5 and queen e2. And here, this move rook b8 was criticized because it loses some time. And people argued that if you play the move bishop f8, that black wanted to play anyway, that white doesn't really want to take this pawn here on account of knight c5. This knight is coming to d3, bishop a6. Black seems to have very good compensation. Risky business here for white, so probably he just wouldn't take this pawn. But after rook b8, white played knight h4, bishop f8. So now this time lost is becoming an issue. If knight c5, we can take on h6. But black took on a4, allowing bishop takes h6. And now knight c5. Tough position. After this rook b8 move, Ting had to really, go into his back pocket and find some counterplay here. Knight g6, this looks scary. The knight comes in, the pawn is pinned, it can't be taken. But black is getting counterplay on the queen side. Rook takes b2. Knight takes f8, we have to take with the rook. If you take with the king, there's of course pin on f6. So rook takes. Actually, the computer wanted to flick in rook d3 here, hating the queen, and then take the knight. Bishop g5. In this position, it's hard to say if it's kind of a miss. I don't know. White doesn't really have any death blow here, like bishop c4 is a good move, queen e3 is a good move. But okay, I think bishop g5 is a very normal move to play here. Bishop is under attack, eventually you have to move it. Now knight h7. We're not going to allow white to take on f6. Bishop back to c1. And probably rook c2 is the best way to keep a balanced game here. But Ding goes rook b5. And this again allows some pressure, bishop a3, unopposed bishop, and we have some pressure here. And we're trying to play either bishop c4 or c4 to kick this rook away. And we go with bishop c4. So now we're threatening, if the rook moves, we win some material. So Ding is kind of forced again to sacrifice the exchange. And he did so objectively, successfully, but he ended up losing the game where he basically froze. I think it was game 7. But here, Nepo does not accept the offer of the exchange. And he takes on e6. I think black has very interesting compensation here if they go for this. You have a very nice pawn mass here on the queen side, and white always has to worry. If he takes at some stage on c5, he always have to worry about us pushing the pawns. And if not, we have good harmony with the pieces on the light squares. We can put a bishop on c4, we can use the b3 or the d3 square for the knight. F6 will come at some stage. Very harmonious, how the pieces would work. But again, Nepo didn't go for this, he took an e6. And now the game is sort of very close to being completely balanced. White has a slight edge here, but even though it was a very long game, Ding was never really in any big danger of losing. Here he fixes the knight on h7 comes into f6. We have some trades, and basically things got traded off. Like bishop takes e5, rook b4, takes on e4, another trade. And here Ding just decides to simplify after rook a4. He goes knight d4. This gives up a pawn, but 3 against 2 on the same side should be really difficult to win. And Ding was very confident in his defensive abilities here. Tactical move, knight g3. If you take it, of course I take this. So rook b7 and now knight a5. Nepo didn't take. It looks bad because these pawns are doubled and we got a passed pawn. But these pawns work really well. They take away a lot of squares. And this passed pawn, it's really difficult to make anything of it. And this sort of, these pawns kind of form a wall for the king and for the opponent's king to enter. And this probably just should be a draw. And Nepo thought the same, playing knight g4. And we're just going to go quickly over these moves here. Eventually, the rooks got traded. Takes. And g5. And black is just hanging on here. h4 is played. White's going to win the pawn back at some stage. So Ding just gave it up immediately. h3. And he brings the king. Correct move. And there's no way for white to proceed here. Black is just in time with a counterplay. Knight e4 hits the pawn. And knight f2 hitting another pawn. We have to either move it or protect it. We move it, but now this check. And now Ding is holding on pretty comfortably. I mean, white tries to go in circles here, but there's not much going on. We give checks. We attack a pawn. Give a check again. Bring the knight back. Check. And okay, some further moves, but eventually there's not much going on. Black is defending successfully, and eventually the draw was agreed here on move 82. After knight takes f4. So good defense by Ding. He had to defend for a long time. Maybe a little bit part of the strategy for Nepo to take away time for Ding to prepare. After all, Ding might have to prepare new stuff now that most of his stuff might have been leaked. But anyway, this keeps the match going. Ding has more chances, 3 more whites. And on Sunday, we'll see, can he strike back? Will be interesting to see what happens in the game, what he plays. And yeah, stay tuned guys, see you.